Hi, and welcome to What Are Whole Foods Anyway? This section, we're going to talk about what whole foods are. Not the store, but the actual foods. That's what we're going to talk about today. And I start with actually 3 principles that I think about when I think about whole foods. The first one is, what are foods in their most natural state? And what do I mean by that? I think about an apple tree, right? Apples fall off the apple tree and we eat them. That's in a very natural state. Now, let's take another example. An Oreo. I've never seen an Oreo tree because there isn't one, because that's not a whole food. So when we think about whole foods, we think about foods in their natural state. We want to think about fruits, vegetables, whole grains. We want to think about beans and nuts and seeds and legumes. Those are all examples of plant-based foods in their natural state. So that's what we want to eat. We also want to think about animal foods at the same time. So that would be if you're eating salmon or you're eating a chicken breast as opposed to a chicken nugget. So you don't want to eat things that are highly processed. This is number 2. So chicken nuggets technically are not even foods. But a chicken breast or a chicken tender, that actually is a food. Brown rice, for example, is something that's not processed. If you've ever had brown rice, you probably noticed it takes longer to cook, and it actually takes longer to chew than like 1 minute white rice. So brown rice would be more of a food that's not processed. 1 minute rice, something that is. Wonder bread, highly processed. Whole grain bread, not as processed. So you want to stick with those foods that are not processed as much. And the reason why you want to do that is they have more minerals, they have more nutrients, they have more fiber, the things that get us healthy and keep us healthy. Number 3, no additives or preservatives. So when you go to the store and you see this blue rocket color drink, that's not what's found in nature. So that probably has additives and preservatives. Now, I just want to stay away from all different types of additives and preservatives because some of them have actually been identified to be cancer-causing agents, and we don't want anything that's going to break down our body or that's going to break down our cells and cause us to be sick. So I just try to avoid all of those altogether. Those are the 3 things that I think about when I think about whole foods. Now, let's talk about categories and groups of whole foods so that you get a better understanding of what you actually might want to think about. So let's talk about proteins. So proteins can be found plant-based or they can be found animal-based. Plant-based examples would be nuts and seeds, beans, and legumes. Those have a high amount of protein, and they also have something that's a high amount of fiber because it's plant-based. So it has 2 for 1 whenever you eat any of those. Now, animal sources of protein, you can have any kind of fish, you can have any type of poultry or fowl, you can have red meat, and you can have things like pork, which are white meat. All of those are considered proteins, and they're also considered whole foods. Now, my recommendation, if you're going to use animal-based products, there are a couple of things I would recommend. First of all, I would recommend that you eat anything that's organic or anything that's wild. The reason why I recommend those is because those actually have more nutrients for you, anti-inflammatory products for you when you eat things that are wild. What do I mean by that? If you're going to have salmon or some kind of fish, if you get it wild, that means that it's not farm raised, but it's wild and it's actually in its natural environment. It's eating plankton and other things that have trace nutrients in it. It gets into the food, which gets into us. When we have things that are farm raised, like salmon for example, then they actually feed the salmon corn. Salmon don't eat corn, but when they feed them corn and grains to fatten them up, then they actually start to reduce the amount of omega-3s and other anti-inflammatory products in them. So if you're going to do fish, think about wild, and think about cold water fish like cod or haddock or other things that are found in the wild and in the deep, because those are going to have the most nutrients associated with them. If you're going to do chicken or fowl, like goose or Cornish game hens, for example, you want to actually have those things that are what they call farm, that they're actually in the farm and they're grass-fed. So if they're grass-fed, they're getting nutrients from the grass that actually helps put nutrients into you. If they're pent up in cages, then they're actually not getting those high nutrients in them. They actually increase the anti-inflammatory properties. They also give them antibiotics and other things that actually go into our bodies and make us less able to use antibiotics when we need them. So for those, I would say grass-fed would be the best way to do that, okay? Or free range is another word you might use. If you are going to do red meat, then again, you want to do grass-fed. You do not want to do commercially raised beef that are going through that same process I just described with the chickens. And the other thing you want to think about is if you are going to do that, just minimize the amount that you use. Studies have shown that cancer causing agents when you're eating that red meat, when you eat the red meat, 4 times or more per week, you have a higher incidence of things like colon cancer. And that's the reason why we reduce the amount of red meats. Pork, I don't recommend. For me personally, I just think that there's a lot of lovely saltiness to pork, but at the same time, it actually is not something that I actually recommend for patients or for clients or for you. So there you go when we're talking about the different types of proteins. We have plant-based proteins that have fiber in them, that have phytonutrients in them, that have cancer-causing and preventative agents in them, things to help us clean out our immune system and detoxify through the fiber. So those are great, and then I've given you my advice for the animal things as well. Now, one thing I have not mentioned yet is dairy and eggs. So dairy is milk and any type of milk products that you're finding from a cow, a sheep, or a goat. And again, if you're going to have those things, you want to make sure they're organic. But I want to make sure that you know 75% of human beings become lactose intolerant over their lifetime. And what that means is the lactose is a enzyme that we use to break down dairy products. When we become lactose intolerant, we stop producing that enzyme, and it causes gas and bloating when we try to eat dairy products or cheese. People usually become very familiar with this in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. If that's happening to you, it means that milk and dairy products, not good for your particular system. You cut them out, you will feel better, and you will have more energy. Eggs, again, just like with the chicken, if you're going to use them, free range is the way to go. They generally will have more omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory, and that's better for you. A lot of people think that eggs are bad, they cause cholesterol issues, but if you're using high-quality eggs that have that omega-3 or that are free range, then you're actually not going to have that problem. So just consider that when you are deciding on that. So that is our scope of proteins. Let's now move to carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, I love carbohydrates. And what I mean by that is fruits and vegetables are considered carbohydrates. And actually so are whole grains. So if you're eating fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, these are whole foods, these are going to be super healthy for you. Fruits, colors of the rainbow. They have antioxidant properties. They have anti-inflammatory properties. They have things that actually help you to actually be healthy. And so you want to eat colors of the rainbow all the time, every day. Vegetables, same thing. There are lots of different types of vegetables. I'm going to highlight one vegetable family that I really like, which is the cruciferous vegetable family. That is a lot of words. Cruciferous vegetables. These are broccoli, cauliflower, bok choy, kale, collard greens. These are all examples of the cruciferous vegetable family. If you eat these 3 times a week or more, you're going to reduce your risk of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, prediabetes, cholesterol. So this should be a staple in your family all the time. It's really simple. Whole grains are a little bit more complicated because people confuse whole grains and whole wheat sometimes. Whole grains is a group. It can be oats, it can be spelt, it can be barley, it can be buckwheat. These are all different examples of grains. Farro is one of the ancient grains that people use. Quinoa, technically a seed. People usually think about it when they're thinking about grains. And these are the types of things that you want to think about when you're eating whole grains. You want to actually avoid white rice because white rice is actually not nearly as much nutrient dense as something like brown rice, for example. So when you're thinking about whole grains, you want to look for labels that say 100% whole grain, 100% whole wheat, 100% oats. Those are the kinds of things that you want to look at. And feel free to do things like have oatmeal, eat quinoa, eat brown rice, and use those instead of using white rice. So that's a great example. And I'll give you a list of lots of different fruits and vegetables and whole grains that you can actually start eating as soon as you get the message. The final category, good fats. Good fats are actually really important because we need fats for every cell of our body. We need fats for our hormones. Our male hormones, our female hormones, our stress hormones all require sources of fat. So we actually need to eat the good fats. So some of the best fats that I recommend, coconut oil is a great fat, extra virgin olive oil is a great fat, grapeseed oil is a great fat. These are different types of fats that you can use. And in the pantry section, I'm going to actually show you some of my favorite fats, but those are just a few that you can use for salads, for seasoning, for sautéing, for roasting vegetables. Those are all great examples of fats that you can use. The number one fat that you need to stay away from is trans fatty acids. If you see trans fatty acids, if you see partially hydrogenated oils or hydrogenated oils, these are the oils that have been created in a laboratory 30 or 40 years ago, and our body actually does not know how to digest them. And as a result of that, our body doesn't break them down appropriately, and they actually can cause problems with our blood vessels that can lead to heart disease or strokes. So where do you find these? Margarine. If you are eating margarine, stop it. Stop eating margarine. You're better off eating butter or extra virgin olive oil than you would be to eating margarine or other things that have hydrogenated oils. It is hidden in so many baked goods. If you're eating pastries and donuts and all of those kinds of things, trans fatty acids are really inexpensive. So lots of different companies will use them in breads and in pastries, desserts, all of that kind of stuff. So you have to read the labels for that, and you have to consider making them yourself instead. So now we've talked about our whole foods in those categories. You'll get listings of examples, of good examples of each one of them for you to be able to use. The other thing I want to talk a little bit about right now is organic food. In terms of organic foods, what should you do? Well, there's a list that you can get from the Environmental Working Group. I will share it with you. It's called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. The Dirty Dozen are the foods that are absolutely essential for you to eat, and for you to make sure that you eat them organic. A lot of them are fruit. So we're looking at apples, pears, nectarines, blueberries, strawberries, spinach falls on that list as well. So these things that you want to make sure you absolutely get organic, because pesticides like to live in those fruits and vegetables. Now, the clean 15 are things that pesticides actually don't get into very much at all. So if you want to focus on organic, if you can afford all organic, definitely do it. If you can't, focus on the dirty dozen. Also, just for you to think about, things like bananas and oranges that have peels on them that you peel off and you eat the inside, you usually don't have to get those organic either. So that is actually helpful to you as well. But you'll get a list of the clean 15 and the dirty dozen with this email. So don't worry about that as well. So there we go. We have whole foods, and we're actually going to do some cooking with whole foods. So you'll see a couple of recipes for that in this segment, and really all of my cooking is all whole foods. So everything you get for the next 6 weeks are going to be examples of whole foods that you can eat and that you can enjoy. And that includes desserts. So we're actually going to have some cool desserts that you can eat as well that you will love, that are whole foods and that are really healthy for you. So thank you for your time for this segment, and I look forward to seeing you next week.